On this edition for Saturday, March 7th, concerns over coronavirus continue as the number of cases rise.
Hello, St. Louis!
The presidential Democratic candidates rally ahead of the upcoming primaries, and empowering women landowners in Iowa. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
When it comes to wireless, Consumer Cellular gives its customers the choice. Our no-contract plans give you as much or as little talk, text, and data as you want. And our U.S.-based customer service team is on hand to help. To learn more, go to consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. From the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center in New York, Hari Srinivasan.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The Food and Drug Administration is rapidly expanding the distribution of test kits to detect cases of the new coronavirus across the country. Vice President Mike Pence made the announcement in Florida today at a briefing with health officials.
At the present moment, we've distributed more than 1 million tests, and in cooperation with those same commercial labs that I mentioned, we'll be expanding access to tests in the weeks ahead to every American.
Even with more kits, there are concerns about the capacity of different states to test people as the number of cases increase, how that data will be gathered and reported. There are nearly 400 total confirmed cases in the U.S., according to Johns Hopkins University, which is tracking the spread globally. Florida officials reported 2 deaths from COVID-19. Both people who died were elderly. That brings the total number of deaths in the U.S. to 19. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo declared a state of emergency after 21 new confirmed cases today.
We have now been testing around the clock, as you know. We are aggressively testing, following up leads, because we want to find as many people who test positive so we can get them out of circulation.
The Grand Princess cruise ship remains off the coast of Northern California with its 21 confirmed cases of the virus among the more than 3,500 people on board. As of this afternoon, officials have not said when or where the ship will be allowed to dock. In Egypt, a cruise ship on the Nile River with 100 foreign tourists is in quarantine in the city of Luxor. 33 people have tested positive for COVID-19 on that ship. In southeastern China, a hotel collapsed today, trapping about 70 people. Officials say the hotel was being used to quarantine people who had contact with COVID-19 patients. Italy reported its biggest daily increase in virus cases. Infections now total more than 5,800 people, and 36 people have died there from the virus in the past 24 hours. In Iran, 21 people have died from the virus just since yesterday, one of them a member of parliament. The number of confirmed cases in Iran is also more than 5,800 people. U.S. health officials continue to caution that the immediate risk of being exposed remains low and that the majority of people who contract COVID-19 will have flu-like symptoms and will recover. President Trump tweeted late yesterday that he is replacing acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney with Republican Representative Mark Meadows of North Carolina. Mulvaney will become the U.S. Special Envoy for Northern Ireland. He has been acting Chief of Staff since January of 2019 and also the Director of the Office of Management and Budget for 3 years. Meadows, who announced in December that he would not seek re-election to Congress, is a close ally of President Trump. He will be the 4th White House Chief of Staff since Mr. Trump took office. The 2 frontrunners for the Democratic presidential nomination campaign today in battleground states that Donald Trump won in 2016. Speaking in Michigan, Bernie Sanders promised supporters that he can defeat the president in 2020.
This is the most consequential election year in the modern history of this country. It is imperative that Donald Trump be defeated. We are the campaign that can defeat Trump.
Former Vice President Joe Biden rallied his supporters in St. Louis.
You know, Senator Sanders likes to say he'll need a record turnout to defeat Donald Trump. He's right. And we're the campaign that's going to do that record turnout.
6 states will hold their primaries on Tuesday, including Michigan and Missouri. Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard took to Twitter last night to call on her supporters to demand changes to new qualifications for the next debate, saying, quote, "I ask that you stand with me against the DNC's transparent effort to exclude me from the debates." The Democratic National Committee said yesterday that only candidates who picked up at least 20% of delegates from state primaries are eligible for the next debate. At least 4 members of the Saudi royal family are being detained, according to reports in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. The Saudi princes were reportedly taken into custody for allegedly plotting to oust King Salman and the king's designated successor, his son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. 2 of the men, the king's brother, Prince Ahmed bin Abdulaziz, and his nephew, Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, were arrested in their homes and charged with treason. Nayef had been crown prince until 2017, when King Salman replaced him with his son, Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS. Saudi officials did not comment on the 4 arrests as of Saturday afternoon. For the latest developments in the U.S. and around the world, visit pbs.org/newshour. Tensions on Greece's border with Turkey escalated today as migrants trying to get into Europe faced off with Greek police. Authorities used tear gas to try and disperse a group of migrants armed with rocks who tried to tear down a border fence. At least 2 people were reportedly injured in today's clashes. Greek police have been clashing with Syrian migrants trying to cross into the country since Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan opened the border last week. Greek officials said that the tear gas and water cannons were used for, quote, deterrence purposes. For more on Turkey's decision to open its borders, Lydia Emanuelidou, a reporter for the public radio news magazine program The World, joins us now from Greece. You have been to the border recently. What have you seen?
Yeah, Hari, I was actually just there today, this morning, on the Greek side of it, in the village of Kastanyes. There's a little hill nearby where there are train tracks, and me and a few other journalists were able to observe the scene. There was tear gas being thrown, it looked like from both sides, smoke bombs, there were the Greek side was firing water cannons, so it was a pretty chaotic scene. In the middle, you know, there's a big fence separating the 2 countries, and there are Greek forces. There's a pretty heavy Greek security forces presence on the Greek side. But overall, you know, it was a pretty chaotic scene today. And last night as well, there were reports of, you know, fires being started on the Turkish side and, you know, Greece throwing water cannons to stop those fires.
Okay, so we have Greek authorities on one side, police forces. We've got Turkish police forces on the other side. And what, in between, there are thousands of people sandwiched as these 2 fire at each other?
Right. So there is you have the Greek forces, a fence, Turkish forces, and then, yes, the hundreds, some say thousands of migrants lined up waiting to get into the Greek into the Greek side. Each side, of course, blames the other for starting, you know, the tear gas or the smoke bombs, the water cannons. But we saw all of those things coming from both sides today.
What are the people there that are waiting doing for food, water, shelter?
So I'm actually on, you know, the Greek side, and it's really, we're not allowed, really no one, the public or journalists, no one is allowed to get close. The border has been completely sealed off, even for legal entry. And so it's really hard to actually get to the other side and see what's going on.
The European Union has come to survey it. There are more troops expected there to be supporting the Greek side, right?
Right, that's correct. The European Union officials were here earlier this week. You know, there's already Frontex, the the European Border and Coast Guard Agency. They've sent people here, and more are expected to come to help the Greek security forces, which, by the way, have already beefed up their presence here. I mean, even if you go a little bit farther away from the border checkpoint itself, it's hard to drive or walk for more than 5 minutes without seeing police and military vehicles in the area. There's a really heavy police and military presence, and that's expected to get even heavier in the coming days.
Border towns usually have different relationships with their neighbors than perhaps countries might. What's happened in that town where I'm sure that people cross daily to try to just live their lives?
That's correct. I mean, as you know, Greece and Turkey have a really long history of conflict. And, if you ask someone in Athens, for example, what they think of your average Turk, they would have a very different answer than the people do here, because the people here in the town of Kastanes do, because they can very easily cross into Turkey. And what I've heard over and over again from talking to local people is that now that the border is completely shut off, even to legal entry, people can't cross. That's hurting the economy on both sides. Businesses are suffering, and also on a more personal level, friendships and relationships are suffering. And so that's one of the things that's really frustrating people here. They feel like they're caught in the middle, of this thing that's beyond them, of this battle between Turkey and the EU.
All right, reporter for The World, Lydia Emanuelidou, joining us via FaceTime today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Hari.
"55 years ago today, hundreds of civil rights marchers, including a young John Lewis, were attacked and beaten by state troopers in Selma, Alabama, after crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The violent assault, which was captured by television cameras, became known as Bloody Sunday. Public outrage from the incident set in motion the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Peniel Joseph is founding director of the LBJ School's Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin, and is author of the forthcoming book, The Sword and the Shield, The Revolutionary Lives of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. Why was this particular moment? We had seen by that time so many other striking images of abuses by police against civil rights advocates and activists. Why did this resonate so much?
Well, it made national and international news, and by the evening when the footage was released on all three networks, ABC was showing Judgment at Nuremberg about the crimes of the Holocaust, and they interrupted Judgment at Nuremberg to show these innocent protesters being beaten. In the late winter of 1965, thousands of people, they come to Selma, they go to the White House, and they're protesting outside of the White House, which really spurs Lyndon Johnson, who was a supporter of voting rights, but it spurs him into even more decisive action.
Here we are heading into another election now, 55 years later, and the topics of race and the topics of access and the topic of rights are back in the news. Are African Americans, do they have more access and more equal access now than 55 years ago? Yes, but where are there areas for improvement?
Well, I think the biggest areas of improvement are trying to end voter suppression. The Supreme Court's 2013 Shelby versus Holder decision ended Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which provided the Department of Justice with the right to amend any new efforts by local states and constituencies to halt voting rights for people of color or poor people or anyone who's on the margins, people who are dual language speakers. Mm-hmm. And since then, the last two national elections, we don't have the protection of the 1965 Voting Rights Acts.
So what are some of the effects of not having that protection?
Well, what we've seen is voter ID laws. We've seen polling locations close. In Texas, where I live alone, 750 polling locations have closed. shut down since at least 2013. The voter ID in Texas effectively stripped 600,000 people of access to the voting polls. And the fact that university students can't use their student ID to vote, but if you have a gun license, you can use a gun license to vote, really shows us the partisan nature in which voting rights are being handled by our elected officials.
And there was also a Supreme Court case, I think this was in the situation in North Carolina, where
Yes.
there were structural rules in place. Now, there is no remedy for that without these protections?
Well, people are still filing legal defense fund, still filing lawsuits, but Section 5 clearly gave the Department of Justice the upper hand in blocking any kind of moves by local states to gerrymander or to really suppress votes by people of color.
What are the lessons here, 55 years later, that we kind of need to remember as we exercise our civic rights and responsibilities?
That struggle continues. 55 years later, we have people of color who don't have the same voting rights access that they did in 1966 and 1968 in national elections. Too many people face long voting lines. Right here in Texas, people stayed in line for 4, 5, 6 hours, even after the polls were closed, to try to get their right to vote. So when we think about the lesson 55 years later, it's that there is no right that's more fundamental for our democracy than voting rights in the United States. And we should really be pushing in a nonpartisan way for voting rights protection that covers all 50 states. So we need a new Voting Rights Act for the 21st century that covers all 50 states and is not fueled by any kind of partisan appeals, but appeals to citizenship and really the virtues of American democracy.
All right, Peniel Joseph joining us from Austin, Texas tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
If there's one thing most Americans know about Iowa, it's that it's farm country. Less well known is that roughly half of Iowa farmland is owned or co-owned by women. Special correspondent Mark Bittman sat down with farm owner and educator Jean Eales to learn more about the growing role women are playing in Iowa's agriculture now and in its future. This report is part of our Future of Food series, supported by the Pulitzer Center.
Jean Eales is an Iowa landowner and educator.
So I grew up on a small farm in Iowa. I ended up being appointed to the State Soil Conservation Committee and heard a presentation that really blew me away. I learned that women own or co-own half the land in Iowa. And yet I didn't see them active as conservationists. And that I was curious about that. How could that be?
Eales learned that many women farm owners have no experience farming themselves. They hire tenants to do it, most of them men. So in 1998, Eales co-founded an organization called the Women Food and Agriculture Network. She holds meetings with other women landowners in Iowa and across the country, teaching them about land conservation and the role the women could potentially play in making sure their farmer tenants are implementing sustainable practices. She's held more than 250 meetings since 2009, educating more than 3,800 female landowners.
One of the things that we find is that they have a real deep-seated concern for the community, for their farmers, for their family, and they really want to keep the land. And yet they don't necessarily get to express that caring and concern because you just don't talk about those things.
She says that's mostly because of decades-old traditions. Men farm, men make decisions about the land, and women are not involved, even when it's their land.
They can have tremendous influence because they actually own this land.
When I talk to men about this, they're like, it's your land. What's the big deal? Just, it's your land. And there's a lot heavier lift for women in that particular setting. So if you think about women my age in particular, we weren't encouraged necessarily to go into science. The men make the farming decisions, about what you're going to plant and the seed and all that kind of stuff. We talk to women all the time that feel like they don't have a right to do those things.
Yeah, it's really a conversation about how are you changing gender roles, or how are you getting men who've spent their entire lives acting in, for want of a better term, a sexist manner to like be more respectful of the women they're dealing
Yeah,
with.
I'm holding out hope that if we change the conversation and give women a place at the table, something's going to change. It's going to have to.
In all female meetings, EELS teaches conservation practices. They include planting a buffer along the edge of a creek to protect waterways from harmful chemical fertilizers, and planting what are known as prairie strips, which keep roots in the ground year-round and bring plant diversity and wildlife to the land.
We know that 50 to 70% of the women who come to a one-day meeting will take an action to improve conservation on their land.
That's kind of great.
It's huge. After a one-day meeting, to have them make a big change and have it be transformative is just, I mean, that's sheer joy as an educator. We always just talk about farmers. They're not the only decision makers out there that can make that difference, and we've got to change how we talk about the landscape.
This week, Rosalind P. Walter, one of the most generous and devoted supporters of PBS programming, including the NewsHour and NewsHour Weekend, died at age 95. Her name has been a constant on the credits of programs like American Masters, which she helped launch, to Great Performances, to Ken and Rick Burns documentaries, and dozens of other programs since the mid-1970s. Rosalind P. Walter served as a trustee at WNET for more than 30 years and became the station's most generous individual supporter in its history. But most people don't know that Rosalind P. Walter was also the inspiration for a 1942 hit song, Rosie the Riveter, and the posters honoring the women who worked in U.S. factories during World War II.
She's making history, working for victory, Rosie the Riveter.
In the early years of World War II, Roz worked as a riveter on the night shift at a Long Island aircraft plant making the Corsair fighter planes.
They had to find out whether women could earn the same pay by doing the same job, so they timed me after I'd learned them all, and I broke all the men's records. So they had to pay the women the same amount.
She was never known as Rosie, always Roz, but the song was born. Rosalind P. Walter was born into a privileged, wealthy family. Her father was president and chairman of the pharmaceutical company E.R. Squibb & Sons, and her mother was a well-known educator, poet, and writer. But her parents refused to allow Rosalind to attend college. She once said that she chose public television as the focus of her philanthropy because she, quote, wanted all Americans, whether they were rich or poor, well-educated or not so well-educated, to have equal access to news and knowledge and the arts. Her legacy is ours to carry on. Thank you, Rosalind P. Walter. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.